One of the biggest mistakes I see in my patients with ADHD isn't forgetting appointments or getting distracted. It's something almost nobody realizes that they're doing. They say yes to things they were never realistically going to have the capacity for. And here's the frustrating part. Even when your ADHD medication is working well, this can still happen. In just a second, I'm going to explain why you, and me too, keep doing this and how to stop. And who am I to bring back your painful fifth grade memories of DARE class and just say no? My name is Dr. Salman Aziz Mirza. I'm triple board certified in adult psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and addiction medicine. And yes, I'm about to spend the next several minutes convincing you to say no more often. But when I ask you to subscribe at the end, I'd really appreciate it if you ignored everything I just taught you. Here's a pattern that I see over and over again. Someone finally starts the right medication. Their focus improves. They can sit down and finish their emails. They can start the laundry and actually come back to fold it and put it away. They can make it through a meeting without mentally leaving the room every 5 minutes. And then reality hits. Monday, it's your boss asking for one more project at work. Friday, it's helping your buddy move. Saturday, it's taking the kids to the zoo, helping with their science fair project, and dinner with the grandparents. Every yes feels completely reasonable in the moment. Then Sunday night arrives. Now they're overwhelmed. And this is often the point when they start asking a question that I hear all the time. Wait, are my ADHD meds not working anymore? Sometimes they aren't, but surprisingly often, they're working just fine. The problem isn't focus anymore. The problem is that their future self has quietly inherited a week that was impossible from the beginning. Because ADHD doesn't just make it harder to focus, it can also make it surprisingly difficult to predict your future capacity. Every unnecessary yes borrows from the future you, future time, attention, and emotional energy. I call that executive debt. The commitment feels affordable when you make it, but the bill arrives later as stress, guilt, burnout, and dropped promises. Sometimes the medication is still working. You just spent tomorrow's executive function yesterday. Here's the weird part. People often assume that ADHD makes someone overly optimistic. I don't think that's quite it. I think ADHD can make us overly optimistic about our future capacity. Taken individually, most of the commitments we make are perfectly reasonable. The problem is predicting what all of them will feel like once they land in the same week. Because predicting is a different skill. It isn't focus, it's forecasting. Focus helps you stay with what's right in front of you. Forecasting helps you predict what a future commitment will actually cost. Forecasting relies on executive function, the brain skills that help you pause, hold your other commitments in mind, and picture the steps ahead and ask, what does future me's week actually look like? When those skills are under strain, the future gets blurry. You don't picture the entire project. You picture the first, clean, simple version of it. But work asks for one more report. Your brain pictures writing the report. What it may not automatically picture is the meeting before it, the data that you still need to collect, the email chain that delays everything, or the fact that Thursday night already belongs to your family. That's why overcommitting can feel so confusing. Research suggests adults with ADHD may struggle less with remembering the task than with building a realistic plan across time. Time perception adds another layer. Adults with ADHD often struggle to estimate and manage time, what many people call time blindness. Time blindness doesn't mean you don't understand how clocks work. We all understand clocks, right? Right? It means that your internal sense of time can become unreliable, especially when a task is boring, emotionally loaded, or still somewhere in the future. 10 minutes disappears. A 2-hour project somehow feels like it should take 20 minutes. and a Saturday 3 weeks from now looks completely wide open. Mostly because future Saturday hasn't yelled at you about picking up the tux for that wedding you told your wife you'd attend. Oops. The relief of saying yes in the moment is immediate. The cost is what's delayed. And that's how future you ends up with a schedule that only worked in theory. That's when the executive debt bill comes due. This is where ADHD medication often gets misunderstood. By now, you may be thinking, okay, if forecasting is part of executive function, shouldn't medication fix that too? The answer is sometimes. ADHD medication can absolutely help. It can improve attention, reduce impulsivity, and help many people sustain effort on tasks that would normally scatter their brain. For some people, treatment turns 3 hours of staring at a laptop into sending the email in 10 minutes. But here's the important distinction. Attention isn't the same thing as capacity forecasting. Medication can help your brain focus. It doesn't automatically teach you how much future you can realistically handle. I often explain it this way. Medication gives you a better engine. It doesn't hire a better project manager. It may help you do the work once you sit down, but it doesn't automatically decide what belongs on your calendar in the first place. That's why someone can take medication, feel more focused, and still end up overwhelmed. The medication helps once they sit down to do the work. The executive debt was created days earlier, when they agreed to work without seeing its full cost. There's another version of this that's easy to miss. Sometimes medication works so well that you start trusting your new focus a little too much. You have a few great weeks and think, maybe I can take on more. Sometimes you can, but other times you've just become more productive at borrowing from future you. Congratulations, you played yourself. Again, that doesn't mean the medication failed. It means the medication opened a door. Now you need the skills and systems to walk through it. Of course, if your medication suddenly feels less effective, talk with your doctor. Sleep, stress, hormones, timing, other medications, and medical conditions can all affect how it feels. But if your focus is better and your life is still overloaded, the missing piece may be forecasting, not a higher dose. So how do you stop creating executive debt? One tool I use with patients is something that I call the future self-test. It isn't about becoming a different person, and it isn't about saying no to everything. It's simply a way to make sure that present you doesn't volunteer future you for something they never agreed to. Before you say yes, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, if this were tomorrow, would I still say yes? Next month is an idea. Tomorrow has traffic, laundry, dinner. If you wouldn't say yes tomorrow, put it on the calendar before agreeing. Second, what am I giving up? Every yes costs something. Sleep, exercise, time with your family, the quiet hour you needed to recharge. A new commitment isn't floating in space. It has to live somewhere. So if you can't tell me what you're moving, you probably aren't seeing the real cost yet. And third, am I using today's time or borrowing from future me? This is the executive debt question. Real capacity means that time actually exists. The energy will probably be there, and the rest of your life still has room to breathe. Imaginary capacity only works if nothing goes wrong and every task takes exactly as long as you hoped. In other words, it works in a week that doesn't exist. That's why the plan looks great Sunday night and impossible by Wednesday afternoon. And notice something. None of these questions forces you to say no. The answer may be yes, not yet, or yes, but only if something else moves. The goal isn't simply to say no more often. The goal is to make promises that future you can actually keep. There's one phrase my patients eventually get tired of hearing me say. Do less. Not because I want your life to become smaller, but because I want it to become sustainable. Doing less isn't giving up. It's protecting the version of you who has to wake up tomorrow. So how do you actually do that? Start by getting comfortable saying, "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." That one sentence gives your executive function time to catch up. It gives future you a seat at the conversation before present you volunteers them for another commitment. Next, make your calendar reflect reality. Don't just schedule the appointment, schedule the drive, preparation, and recovery time too. ADHD brains often plan the main event and forget everything wrapped around it. Finally, decide on your boundaries before someone asks you to use them. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. If this becomes a priority, something else has to move. Those aren't selfish responses. They're how you stop handing future you bills they never agreed to pay. Medication often works best when it's paired with planning skills, behavioral strategies, and changes to your environment. Medication helps your brain work better. Systems help your life work better. And both matter. If you've spent years wondering why your ADHD still feels overwhelming, even though your medication helps, maybe you weren't failing. Maybe your medication wasn't failing either. Maybe your brain was simply making promises your future self couldn't afford to keep. Sometimes the most productive thing a person with ADHD can do is simply do less. If this video gave you a new way to think about your ADHD, subscribe. I make videos that turn complicated neuroscience into tools you can actually use. And check out my GSD system linked below if you want a practical way to get shit done without relying on panic or overwhelm. Until next time, be safe and be well.